Wonderful. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to the Contractor Commute. We're so excited to have our guest on today. We have Allie Anderson. And if you guys have not met Allie, you're in for a treat today. She is spunky and a go-getter, and she's just so full of knowledge, so full of wisdom. If you guys haven't seen her, she's on Instagram. She owns and founded Integra Builders. Build Her, if you're not familiar with that organization, is just built to empower and train up women in construction. And what she's doing and the group, the collaborative group that's doing there is just amazing for construction and the future of construction. And so we're so pumped about that. And then you're also a Build Show contributor. So Allie, welcome to the show. We're excited to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Funny enough, Allie and I share the fact that we both grew up in the Chicago area, right? Did you grow up there or are you just there now?
I grew up there. So originally I was born
Okay.
in Texas, but yeah, we made our way up to the suburbs of Chicago. That's primarily, I grew up in Lisle. And yeah, and then I've lived downtown in the city now for the last, oh God, I'm getting old, 20 years.
I have a lot of family up there. Grandparents, my dad and mom are up in the Chicagoland area. They're in the suburbs. As a young kid, I think it was Northbrook. Dad did a lot of work in along the lake, a bunch of the North Shore remodels and a lot of kitchens and bathrooms in that area. So a very cool city, but also a challenging city to build in. What kind of unique, because the building codes are strict. We're still requiring conduit pipe. And it's a very tough city to build in.
Yeah, it was actually, it wasn't until I became a Build Show contributor that I realized that not everybody did conduit pipe and copper and cast iron, for, this is all I knew. And I was like, what is Romex? I was like, explain it to me again. So someone could just drive a nail into a wall, right through their wire, nothing.
I had such a hard time adjusting myself too, moved from Chicago to Springfield, Missouri 12 years ago. And it was like, wow, this is different.
Yeah. In 2020, I thought I was going under. So I opened an office in Michigan, and everything is Romex and PVC there. And I remember when we were doing that, and I was like, okay, I guess Romex is cool, it's all right. And then, we were just about to close up the walls after all rough inspections were passed. And the client was like, can we raise the sconces a foot? And I was like, no, I don't think we can. But yeah, Chicago, I have I kind of feel like Chicago's my baby on the construction side. I think it is daunting maybe for some people starting out, but the good thing about Chicago, there's two really good things. Number one, it's consistent, right? Once you understand what the inspectors are looking for, you can pretty much hit it every time. The inspectors want to look at the drawings and look into real life and see the same thing. That's what they want, when it comes down, and they want to see a clean job site. Everything is about impression, right? We want to be gliding that inspector through the house, right? This is a hand waving sweep of things, with maybe a couple touch points. If you got the inspector stopping in the middle of the house and pulling out a checklist, it's over, it's just,
You locked at the door.
yeah, just throw yourself off the balcony. So it's going to be ugly. And then, the municipalities actually, I find to be more challenging than the city of Chicago, because they have tree preservation plans, I feel like every municipality kind of some have their own landmark commissions, and what's landmarked, what's not. And I feel like the smaller the municipality, the more focus there is on what you're doing, so yeah, but it's okay. Communication is key. I find, with a healthy dose of anger management. I only made that mistake once.
Oh, that's fantastic. Walk us through what kind of work you guys do. So you build, you remodel a lot of historic old homes from what I'm understanding. Anything cool you're working on now? What do you guys do?
Yeah. So I have an office in Chicago and I have an office in Western Michigan. In Chicago, we focus primarily on major renovations and historical restorations. We work on a lot of landmark residences that are on the National Registry of Historic Places or on the local landmark commissions. Historically, we've always been pretty much gut rehab, major renovation, major historical restoration. We've never really been like a small kitchen and bath remodeler. That's kind of its own beast. So we're a boutique builder. We do about 5 projects per year, depending on scale. So we're really dialed in to what we're doing. In Western Michigan, we do pretty much all new construction out there. I opened that office in 2020. So those are new construction projects, and we take those on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, we really love the work. We are often, everything we do is architecture led. So all of our projects have, pretty robust architecture and design teams involved, which I really love. I really love the challenge and the project management. It keeps the projects unique. It keeps them fresh and fun, keeps them a little complicated, maybe a little litigious at times, but overall fun. And yeah, so that's pretty much Integra in a nutshell. We're a small team. We do a few projects per year, and yeah, I'm not looking to be like a huge company. I just really want to love the work and make money at least every other year.
You can average it out at the end of that.
Yeah. A tax break here and there.
I'm curious about the 2 location thing. How did that come about? I'm like, I don't hear about that often with a lot of the people that we're talking to. And I know that's a little bit tangent from what we're wanting to talk about today with like bidding and some of that stuff. But how did that come about, and how are you excellent in 2 places?
Yeah, so that came about because I thought I was going out of business in 2020, and I wasn't going down without a fight. So like 2020, is like COVID, and like all of our projects just went down like soldiers. And for us, like we have a pretty robust backlog, right? And we have, pre-construction. So, we're really like planning out our projects pretty far in advance. Well, in COVID, as everyone knows, like no one was moving out of their house to do a construction project. So, it was just like all of our projects just ended, like there was no work. But what was happening is the architects were calling me and being like, Al, you got to open up an office in Michigan because everyone's building second homes. So it's the same Chicago clients, but you're building in Michigan. And I was like, yeah, well, it's that or abject failure. So we're gonna go there. And then I learned through the process, like Michigan is like a totally different beast than Illinois. Like Illinois is very contractor friendly. I would say Michigan is not.
Interesting.
It's a lot more consumer friendly, which is fine. But they also, like the builders, you have to take a builder's exam, a state exam to get a license. I'm dyslexic, so that's a problem. Basically I heard like there were so many trades that I was meeting through the vetting process of having to like build our first project that like so many of my subcontractors like really wanted to be builders, but they couldn't pass the test. So I heard it was like the 3rd hardest test. It's like the MCAT, the LSAT, and the builder's exam. And it was hard. Like I took it like 4 times. And then the 4th time I came in, it was the same proctors, right? It was like the same people in the office, like watching me come in again.
Like, what's up? It's me again.
Yeah. And they had like a sign on the wall that was like looking for, hiring for proctor. And it was like quick benefits rundown. And I was like, guys, if I don't pass today, I'm going to apply for this position. Because like clearly I shouldn't be doing this. I'm just like going through this test, and I was like looking at this drawing set, and I was like, this is a drawing set I would give back to an architect and say, let me know when it's done, and like I'm being tested on this drawing. I'm like, I can't even figure out the dimensions of the living room. Like, what are we doing? And then like, I'm going through, and I was like, these are questions I would ask my subcontractors, but the benefit of that is when I actually started when I did projects, the trade pool in Michigan is also pretty rough, I would say.
Interesting.
And so I completely understood why they require that test. And I was actually surprised. Like I am definitely a better builder having opened the Michigan office and gone through that process, because like I was amazed at like how much I had to use that information. Where in Chicago, we've got we've got all Eastern Europeans and Polish and Latinos, and like these guys know their stuff. Like I didn't even realize how spoiled I was with the quality of contractor we had in Chicago. And the other issue in Michigan is there's really only a handful of custom builders because of that test, right? So the thing is like all those builders are using the same subs. They're using the same trade. So it also makes the cost of construction really expensive. And it makes the subcontractors pretty cocky, I would say, you know. So like then we started like in the middle of our first project, like I just abandoned, like once we got to finish carpenter, I was like, forget it. Like I got a house, like I had a cabin. I was like, everyone's staying at my cabin. Like I'm bringing everybody from Chicago because I still have to build, it's still a $3 million house. Like I still have to deliver a final product. I can't just like shrug my shoulders and be like, oh, it's Michigan. Like no one cares, you know, like no one cares. So so like how to be excellent in two places is a big challenge, which is why like in Michigan, I really have to be very selective about what we're building because I have to bring everybody over. So it's got to be like of a certain scale. It's got to be with the right architect because there's just a lot of liability over there as well. So, you know, it's the grind, but so the Michigan office was opened in 2020 to kind of get us through a hard patch. And we're really, really proud of that project. It came out really, really beautiful. But yeah, I would say our heart and soul, our primary focus has been, the majority of our work has been in Chicago.
It's really neat. Wow. Way to be very flexible and tenacious through adversity.
Survival is a strong emotion. We'll just put it that way, you know?
We've all been there. Yes. Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, and construction is one of those things too, where it's like, you know, so much of it is just like ripping off the Band-Aid and getting started. Then the rest of it is just reaction. You're just reacting to everything around you, you know, and pivoting and going, you know.
You talk about this process of, you know, you have process now, and you talked about like the architecture-led building process now. Is that something you've always done, or did you arrive at that by kind of maybe going down a different path and deciding you wanted architecture to drive the building process? Because there's a lot of people that we come across, you know, contact with are like, well, let's just build it. You know, here's the back of the napkin sketch. How hard could it be?
Yeah, I think for me, so when I first started in construction, I was just like, I just wanted to be like everyone on HGTV, and I wanted to like flip houses. So I had hired a GC. I hired a terrible GC, and I ended up having to take over my own project. But I always thought I was going to stay on the developer side until I ended up in litigation with my business partner. And then I was broke. And then I was like, but I have this GC license. So then I had a friend who was like, hey, like we're over budget. We haven't even started yet, like on our project. Like you're broke and need something to do. Like, you want to help us out? You know, you want to build the house? And I was like, yeah, you know, I was like, as long as you know, I don't quite know what I'm doing. And that
I love you owning that though, right at the beginning. So few people do that. I mean, that's awesome. But like,
like expectations set.
Just managing. Let's take it down. Like you're at your collarbone. Let's bring it lower. Like, And that project ended up being really challenging. Like it had structural failures. We had like zoning issues, like the city like shut it down. And then I ended up meeting like everybody in the city, including the deputy commissioner, like through that whole process. So like in the moment, it was like a ball of fire. But like through it, it really built a lot of foundation for my company. Yep. And also, like, you know, my friends freaked out. So then I built a lot of contractual language around things that happened where I was like, wow, I don't want that to happen again, you know, and not have any recourse, you know. And then I had another friend who was like, hey, I got like a 2-flat renovation, you know, you want to do that? And I was like, sure. And he had an architect. And I was like, wow, this is way easier. Like, we have like a plan. We all have like a basis.
Imagine that.
We all have a basis of what we're talking about. And also from like a contractual bidding standpoint, it gave me something very specific to reference and benchmark things against, not just a bunch of words on paper that can be interpreted one way or another, which is where on that other project it was, right? It's like my word against their word, and we're friends. And, you know, so, I was like, and the architect, what I really loved about having the architect on board is like, if I had a change order, client didn't need to believe me. They had to believe their architect. And I was like, oh, like this is a much better dynamic for everybody involved. And then I started meeting architects, and I realized, and it was very clear to me that like it was a very adversarial relationship between builders and architects. And I was like, oh, I'm like, I don't really have an ego. Like I can come in and just be all about the project. I'm like, I can be like the architect's builder, and architects have lots of projects and homeowners have one project. So like, that's a good business development avenue for me. And then I was like, yeah, and I was like, what, I'm going to be a developer and install the same like white cabinets and Kohler fixtures and like live on the edge of like, will it sell? Will it not sell? I was having all kinds of developers being like, don't do it, and, so then I was like, yeah, I really liked the idea of being able to make a difference. And I also had the experience of having a bad contractor, was now becoming an up and coming contractor, and was like, there are just a few things that contractors could do differently to really change the entire experience for the homeowners and for their architects, right? Just a little more project management, a little more transparency, a little more oversight, right? Tangible oversight. And I think back then I thought the problems were with the builders. Like I just thought like all builders were degenerates and like they were just trying to like, hose everybody. Now that's completely changed. Now I'm very pro builder and just realize we're just like an abused and jaded bunch of people that are reacting to the world around us. But it's been really, for me, the most rewarding part has been just trying to incrementally change the industry, especially on the custom side. It's like if you're doing repairs and you're doing kind of handyman work, that's its own thing. But if you're doing, $1 million projects, multi-million-dollar projects, like there's a standard that needed to be set. And I'm pretty proud to think that I set it. Like, definitely the competition changed. Pre-construction started. I would argue I started pre-construction for residential in Chicago. I was like, I started doing it, and then suddenly I heard other people were doing it, and I'm like, that's great. Like this is where it needs to go. Yeah. And these houses need to change. We have to build differently. Like we can't keep rebuilding houses every 50 years. People can't afford it. And everyone needs somewhere to live. And like, we have a huge responsibility as builders to make sure that we build these houses to prepare them for their next generation of use. The way we've been doing things can't be the way we continue to do things. So
I love that.
My grandfather used to say when people would comment, "Oh, they don't build like they used to," and he was an architect, and he would say, "Thank God."
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like pride in the old generation. And my grandfather on my mom's side of the family, he's from Austria, and you have buildings that are hundreds of years old, and so he's seeing modern building in America, and he's like, "This is ridiculous! Like these houses are like disposable houses," and versus something the last hundreds of years. And you had this experience.
I was just in Europe a few weeks ago, and I was like, how do I get this here? That's what I'm thinking. I'm like, for a lot of money, you too can import marble from Europe.
Well, and so much of it is economy of scale. I think one of the biggest challenges of building right now, and I see it all the time, on the comments on Instagram and things, is like these trains of thought, right, from people, and money is the big driver, right? Like people want projects, homeowners want to, like, it's the American dream, right? To own a home, right? This has always been like the big driver. And I feel like that really has created a lot of shady building standards, over the years. Cause like people come to me and they're like, oh my God, how do you work on these century old homes in Chicago? And I was like, I will take a house built in 1880 over a house built in 2001. Contractually all day long. Like that century old home will have less of a buffer in my number than something in 2001, because like I have no idea what they built in 2001. It could be anything. Whereas in 1880, it's like, I know I have old growth joists.
Yeah.
I know
Yep.
how it's built. I know it's 3 bearing walls, and it's like, what you're going to find and what the systems are. Even if some, slumlord came in and like drilled through all the joists, there's still like 12-inch old growth joists,
Yep.
like
Yep.
I'm
Yeah,
not going to have to temporarily shore it, while we're working.
Yeah.
I would say to your American dream comment too, like, if you think about, I agree, people want to own a home, but they don't want to pass it down. Like they just want what they want, not to like, so that's why they're not, you know what I mean? Like that's why when you go to Europe and you look at that, it's like, it's a century old, it's passing to generations. People don't think that way anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, how do we change people's thought to be like, hey, if you want, which I mean, assets, you know what I mean? Like, I guess that's probably the modern day. People like money, people have always liked money, but like, it's a better asset if it lasts longer, obviously. So I guess that's the way you phrase that in today's culture, because people don't care about their 3 generations from now living in their home. They're like, they're not going to, they're going to be wherever, you know what I mean? So it's interesting.
Yeah, that is a really interesting, that's actually, that's a really interesting concept. Yeah.
I want to take us back to what Allie was saying about transparency and project management, like a little more of that, and walk me through what you see lacking in the transparency category and how you've changed that. Like you're a trendsetter in that way of just being able to, and I think a lot of people are setting off. I've seen so many times where people almost think like less information is better. We need to kind of like hide the details from the consumer. And you're talking about transparency where you're actually revealing the details. How does that work for you and your clients?
Yeah, it's a nuance that's definitely evolved like over the years. I think residential home building is very emotional process for the clients. And I think that emotion has dictated a lot of how people do things, right? Like people don't understand, right? They're spending all this money, clients, but they don't understand things. And sometimes when you try and explain them because they're so emotional, it gets skewed in some way. And so, initially I thought, builders, they're just, these remodelers and builders, they're just keeping it close to the breast. They don't want anybody to know anything so they can maintain their profit margin. But I think what it is, I think what it actually is that builders really want to be good. And they really take a lot of pride and a lot of care and concern. And when they've shown that vulnerability and transparency, they've gotten burned with it. It's been
So
used
good.
against them,
Yeah.
or it's been skewed, and fundamentally they felt misunderstood. And I think anybody feeling misunderstood is worse than being insulted. Like when someone is misunderstanding what you're trying to say, it's the most frustrating thing. And there's so much opportunity for that to happen. And I think that, it's emotional, and emotion is uncomfortable. Right. And so people don't want to enter into emotional situations. They don't want to have hard conversations. And no offense, I think most men would rather it just blow over, and I think maybe a lot of husbands would feel the same way, but their wives definitely do not.
We will solve this problem. We will talk about this.
Everyone will get on the same page. Or,
that's awesome.
And so I think, for us, just coming in is, I think misconceptions happen in the abyss, right? Misconceptions happen when you are not touching, when you're not touching your clients on a regular basis, right? Like if it's in the silence. And I think there is a tendency to say like, yes, I'm working on this. Like, I think a lot of builders are like, yes, I am working on that thing. I told you I was working on that thing, but like you haven't talked about it in 2 weeks and they're waiting and you're silent, and the builder is just like, well, I don't have anything else to say yet. Like I don't have an answer yet, or I don't. And so therefore I'm not saying anything. Right. And this is where those emotions go rampant, right? Because they're just like in their own mind, like at brunch with their friends, whatever, like getting all riled up,
filling in the
whatever.
blank.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, like if the emotion, if that tea kettle gets too hot, they don't even know how to cool down. Right. Or then it becomes an ego thing of like, then it feels like if I back down, I'm losing, or, these are all the interpersonal things that are happening on job sites all the time, that builders are, for the most part, just really trying to avoid, at all costs. And so, I think the consensus has been less information is better information, because the clients wouldn't know what to do with the information if they had it, right? I think there's a happy medium there of like, right, we don't want to like confuse the clients or overload them with information, but we do need to be communicating consistently and in a way that they understand. So like we have always had what I call like the weekly recap email. And it's just an email that goes out. I still do it because like it's sort of rudimentary, but it works. And it's just every week it's items completed, next steps, action items for you. And it's just the snapshot of the week. And I tell the clients, this is not an overarching, this is everything going on in your project. This is, what did we do this week? What are we doing next week? And what do we need from you right now? And then at the bottom is just a little summary, right? And that weekly email, you know, the clients can respond to it however they want. Sometimes on Monday morning, I have, you know, the Constitution, you know, on Monday morning. Sometimes clients are not really reading them, and they're reading them and there's no response. Some clients are only responding to things that they want to, but the architect and the design team are copied on that as well. And it just creates a dialogue, right? And it gives you something to reference back. And the other thing that we do is meeting notes, you know, so like being on that job site and writing down what was discussed, what was asked, and what was answered. Like I literally have RFIs and I have my project manager say Q : what was the question? A : what was the answer? What did they ask and what was the response? And then you have your action items, and then you have your summary. And I'll tell you what, we reference those meeting notes 6, 8, a year down the line, right? Because sometimes you can't remember. Why is the medicine cabinet 28 inches high instead of 24? Why did we do that? Right? Like what, you know, so much happens on these job sites. And I think being able to, the more tangibility you can have, the more emotions remain calm, right? Like it's when, if you end up in a he said, she said situation with a client, with anybody on your job site, you're probably going to lose one way or another. Like you're going to lose on you might win the argument, but you're going to lose the relationship, or you know, and you get all you need is a few chinks in that chain and things go south real fast. Like construction's very volatile. So for us, like really encouraging that communication. And I speak a lot on like, don't run away from hard conversations, run right into them and just do hard things to make life easier. You know,
that is life advice right there,
So
Allie.
good.
So good.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant idea. And it just made me think of like how you actually are leading the conversation and showing your expertise in those conversations by having a process defined where your consumer, the client that you're serving, doesn't know how it's supposed to be done. This might be the first time ever doing it. And now you're leading that conversation and you're showing how it's done with professionalism. And they're saying this, you know, you care, and you're able to answer the questions, and also there's not the he said, she said. I love that. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, and even those customers or clients that are not responding, it's like, well, I don't need to because Allie's taking care of it. Like she's on top of it. So it's like, it's that unspoken thing that I love about that process too. So good.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's about keeping it. There's also a lot of people on the job sites, right? And, you know, there's a lot of emotions, not only from the clients, it could be from the architects, from the design team. Let's face it, it's always the design team. Very rarely the architect.
Oh, boy, they
you
get a bad rap from builders, don't they? I mean, designers are always the problem.
But you know, it's also like just keeping that open, like just keeping everything very flat. You know, like that's really our job as the builder. Like, and I'm coaching my team all the time on that, where it's like, guys, everybody fluctuates around us, but we remain the same. You know, so like we remain the same. And like, no matter how angry someone is making you or how unfair you think something is, like just stay the same. It will pass. Whatever you're feeling will pass, and it will pay you dividends later. Say it to me, you know, say it in our internal meeting, you know, we'll be happy to empathize with you. You know,
so good. Yeah. So the coaching aspect of what you're doing, how big's the team?
So I have 5 on my team.
Yeah.
And then we have about 47 trades.
So are you helping them as well? Like, I mean, there's probably opportunities where you're needing to coach them as well.
Yeah. So I'm actually really strict in my contract about subcontractor communication. So like my subs are not allowed to communicate with the clients or architects, and the architects and clients are not allowed to communicate with my subs. I actually have a fee assigned to it every time it happens, $1,000 every time it happens.
Have you had to do that? I mean, have you
Uh-huh.
had to charge somebody? What, how
Yeah.
did
That's
that go?
awesome.
How
I
did
love
that go down? I'm just
It
curious.
never goes down well, but it does always produce a very good conversation, because the only time I've ever allocated that fee is when the very reason that term exists happens, right? It's when, somebody thought they were being nice to the sub, and the sub just decided that they were being mean, and walked off the job, or they said something to a sub, and then the sub was like, okay, no problem, and then a change order came that wasn't pre-approved, right?
Yeah.
And the client needs to do it. And I don't think anyone can possibly imagine how emotional the subcontractors are. They're so prideful, and they are so proud, and they want to be so good that like you crush their world
Yeah.
with any type of negative feedback.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm very protective of them. And I also am
That's
like,
good.
look, you have me as CEO. You have my mom, who's the office manager. You have a superintendent. You have who's in charge of all projects. You have a site foreman who's dedicated to your project on the day-to-day, and you have an internal project manager. There is no reason that you need to talk to anybody but Integro about your project, right? And it's because we want to control the conversation, right? And who knows like what my subs are going to say, like,
Right.
who knows,
Yeah.
they're just like filling space. Like if they feel 1 ounce of awkwardness, they just start talking, and it's like, stop,
You're like, I promise I'm protecting you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm protecting
From
everyone.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had somebody on the show that had talked about somebody that they had hired as a subcontractor, and he was telling the homeowner how poorly the person they had hired was doing things or whatever, and it was just like, and I just had
So
to be
cringy.
straight. I had to just be straight with them and tell them how bad it was, and it was just like, no,
No.
you go talk to the builder about that.
Abort.
Don't do it. So
Yeah.
you have you have the contract with your client and the subcontractor saying you guys are not talking to each other. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically just saying, and it explains, and I mean, and a big part of like, once we have a contract, like I sit down with the clients for, a couple hours, and I'm just like, okay, the contract here, this is the point. We're about to get married. Like once we're fixed bid, but even cost plus, like once you've chosen your builder, once you're under contract with your builder, it's over. Like my number is the number. If there's a change order in the future, it doesn't matter if you think I'm hosing you. The fact is my price is the price. So like, you got to be real careful with who you're hiring, because there is an immense amount of trust that you have to have like in that person. And so I always like, I'm like, so if we think of it like a marriage, the reality is marriages have to work, right? You need respect and loyalty and communication and empathy and patience and all of the things, because bad marriages end in divorce, and divorce takes lawyers. And that's what we're avoiding. And so here in this contract, we are hoping for the best and planning for the worst, but we're primarily establishing the rules of play, right? So I always tell my clients, like, my contract has some terms and terminology and verbiage that may be atypical, but let me tell you why they're here. Let's talk about what that means. Let's talk about what your responsibilities are, what we're looking for from you. For example, let's talk about what you're doing versus what your architect is doing. So for example, you have to make yourself reasonably aware of the project and observe the project to guarantee that the work, when completed, will be approved. What does that mean? It means don't watch me build that fence, wait until it's built, and then tell me you don't like it. You have to tell me you don't like the fence while the fence is being built. That's the point, right?
Yeah.
Just, things like that. And also, like, I have 3 paragraphs in there that are like, I am not a designer. I am not a designer. I am not a designer. Like, I am not here to confirm that you like your design. I'm just here to build your design. If I build your design and you don't like it at the end of the day, please don't sue me. Like, I am not a designer, I don't like it either, like it's not my job to question it. It's only my job to question constructability. There's
Well,
things like
what
that.
what a brilliant pairing between you and a designer and architect, though,
Yeah.
because now they know you have their back, and then
Yeah.
therefore that it's reciprocal. They're going to have your back in the situation where, that we designed that when we screwed up, whatever. It's like there's no reason for them to ever get sideways with you, which is I think it's smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're a bad designer,
Well.
and then it's like
Yeah.
you have nowhere to run.
You want
that
to
sort
kind
of
of avoid
thing.
those.
That's so good. I think one of the things, even just kind of circling back on the transparency side, we talked a lot about from a communication standpoint and from a contract standpoint. What about, we heard you talk at Build Show Live about bidding, fixed bid. Obviously it was a long conversation. It wasn't a 10-minute little snippet on, fixed bids versus cost plus versus, those kinds of things. But I'm curious, just in terms of like the transparency side, how do you add that to your estimates? Like it takes ruthless attention to detail from your standpoint. And so obviously attention to detail equals more time, which hopefully it saves you money in the end. You make more money because you're not losing out on some of those things that you're missing. But can you kind of walk us through that side of things of how did you come to the point to where you're like, okay, we're going to do fixed bid and here's the process for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, backing up a little bit, I know that there are a lot of builders, especially on the custom build side, that do cost plus. And I know because they tell me all the time, like they go cost plus because they're afraid they're going to lose on fixed bid, right? And so I think there's just kind of this kind of knee-jerk reaction that's like, oh, cost plus is better. It's better for the clients because it's transparent, right? Like, cost plus is transparent. They're seeing the bid and then I have no risk because, the price is what the price is and I'm not having to absorb any cost. I feel completely the opposite of that. Like, I feel like cost plus is probably the worst way to run a construction project. And it offers the least amount of transparency in a bid that you can possibly have, because the only transparency that a cost plus contract affords a client is the markup. It doesn't offer them transparency of scope. It doesn't offer them transparency of budget. They have no idea where their budget's actually going to land. They don't have any control over what the scope actually is, or if those pre-construction numbers were properly reflecting the scale of their project and the minor items in there. And it doesn't offer the builder it offers the builder more risk, in my opinion, because now it's like your clients are in your business. So how do you control what subs you're using? Like, what's the tendency of a client when they're over budget? They want to see more bids, right? And it's like, no, like for me, I'm delivering a final product. I have said that I'm going to deliver your product. Well, I need to be working with the people I need to be working with. Maybe I'm working with a trade because he's the best suited for that type of application. Maybe I'm working with that trade because he's available at the time I need him to be available. Maybe I'm working with that trade because he works better with this other guy who's got to do this job. And that guy's grumpy in the, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot that we're dealing with as builders, and you lose, or at very least are challenged on your ability to run your company when you've got everybody in your numbers, right?
Yeah, the client's the boss, apparently. It sounds like.
Exactly. And so from a fixed bid standpoint, it's like, if I'm doing a fixed bid with the client, the only thing they don't have is my markup. The only thing they're not seeing is my cost and overhead, my profit and overhead. But what they are getting is an adherence to a scope of work, to a drawing set, and to a final price, right? Like, in a fixed bid situation, I have to submit a change order. If there's a change, I have to submit a change order. That change order has to be approved before I can move forward with the work. It's got to be, fixed bid. And I think for that reason, some builders are scared, but the trick with fixed bid is that you have to be detailed. You can't wing it. You have to be detailed. You have to be methodical. You have to do pre-construction, at some level to get it right and protect your numbers. And you have to build, and the way that you build in your bid is, yes, it's with, there's a buffer in there. but cost plus is one giant buffer.
Right.
So,
Right.
so some builders do it where they give a bid plus a 10% contingency, but some people do it that way. For me, it's just like, you just have to be really careful,
Yeah.
and you have to be working with that team in pre-construction, for some time before you go under contract, and make sure that you understand the project, not only in scope, but in context.
I'm hearing kind of the audience thinking in their minds of like, well, the cost plus, they're kind of weighing some of these things out. I had a friend of mine get a cost plus job because he thought it afforded this level of transparency of, you're only going to pay what the contractor's only going to make 12% off of me. But at the end of the day, the scope element was so far off. It was twice what they originally estimated the project to be. And he said, we will never do that again, because your client doesn't even get agency anymore to choose what they're getting anymore. So I love what you're calling out on the scoping side. So, I know you mentioned this earlier too, Kinsey. It's just like the scope becomes such an important thing, where a lot of times it gets glossed over on a lot of these cost plus jobs. Well, we'll figure that out later, kind of a thing. And so do you have a very refined scoping process then if you're doing this, particularly with remodels, because you're opening walls up and you find out later, oh, that's different than what we anticipated it to be, and now that's a change order because it's very well defined scope. We weren't doing anything. We weren't moving the plumbing stack, and now we discovered there's a plumbing stack we need to move, so that's a change order. Am I hearing this right?
That's correct. And the key to fixed bid is that you have to make it clear. Like, you can't go down to the bottom dollar. You can't be bringing your clients and architect over to a corner and being like, here, let me show you this little corner and why I need $1,200. It's like, no, you need to be like, when you have a change order, it should be substantial and it should be abundantly clear to everybody in there. If it's not, that's what your buffer is for. You take care of it as the builder, you move on. Right. That's really where the key is, because otherwise, like in cost plus contracts, I mean, they're paying every screw, every debris haul, I knew a builder who said he brought in like a drywall inspector to inspect the drywall. I was like, did you just need 40 grand? Like, cause that's what it sounds like, like if you were a fixed bid, you would not be bringing in a drywall inspector to like inspect, the drywall. And yeah,
where do you draw the line, Allie, on when something's a change order? Because you're doing a $500,000 remodel, $1 million remodel, and somebody's got like the plumbing stack idea or the electrical wires or something you weren't aware of. Like, how do you determine where that fine line's at?
For me, if it's ambiguous, I eat it. If it's not ambiguous, I don't. Like, it has to just be clear cut.
That's good. That's good.
If we've got 58 recessed cans and now we have 63. Okay, that might be $180. It's a change order. It's not really based on the price as much as it is on ambiguity. But if something is gray, or I feel like there's a chance a client may not understand, I generally will just eat it.
Great advice. That's good. Yeah. Make it very clear. The whole process of arriving at a contract, there's this danger that we see a lot of people have of like, they start off with a very basic contract and then they're so reactive with contracts. Well, next time that'll never happen again. And then they add a line in there. And then the next time something, crap goes down, they're going to be at, and it just balloons. Like, where do you draw that line of like what should be in a contract? To give me an example of this, personally speaking, I completed a remodel. The client came to me and said, what are we doing with all the leftover product? That's mine. I paid for that. And I was thinking to myself, no, actually you didn't pay for that. We brought in extra material to cover this job, so we didn't have to make extra runs. The extra product is mine. And so, I was like, that ended up in the contract. You end up adding all these things so how do you arrive at a good solid basis for a contract if you're getting started?
I'm going to go with conventional wisdom there. And I do the same thing. Like, my attorneys know at the end of the year, I call it the bloodbath email, where I'm like, okay, I'm going to think of everything. What happened? Like what horrible things happened this year on a project, or could have been a bad situation, and put language in the contract in there. And I think that's where, like, you don't want to be trapping people in your contract. Yeah. I think fundamentally for me, that my contract is there to facilitate their project, right? Like, I tell clients very openly, like, we only do a handful of projects per year. if I don't execute your project on time, I lose money. Like the more delayed your project gets, the more money I lose. So my entire contract is built around facilitation, right? So I don't like change orders, and I will charge you for every change order, whether or not you approve it. If you're asking me for a change order, like it's very easy to make changes in pre-construction. It's very expensive to make them in construction, right? Like anything that we can be in control of, we should have been in control of before we were ever throwing a hammer. If we did it differently, you're going to pay for that. It's going to be very expensive. Why? Because I'm never going to make more on a change order than I will on a new project. Right. I need to get to the, I need to get to the next project. And I'm very comfortable being open with clients because I want them to level with me and like understand that like, I'm not doing you any favors. I'm not your best friend, but nothing is arbitrary. We are operating according to the terms of the agreement throughout the entire project. So nothing can become arbitrary later. And I think where the contract comes in is where things got arbitrary, right? Where it's kind of like, no, like you didn't, first of all, you didn't actually buy that product, and like you didn't haul it in and I'm hauling it out. And like, yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, but it's like, you just got to get one person that really digs their heels in. And that kind of stuff is scary because it's like, you can build this beautiful house and like no reference over a can light. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, I think that's the hardest part of the industry. Where
should there be more? Sorry, Allie, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying it's one of the hardest parts of the industry is that it's so litigious and things go south so fast, no matter how well-meaning both parties were,
Maybe there needs to be more collaboration even on the contract side as an industry where we should be setting more baselines, because I think there's this, I know so many guys have zero contract whatsoever, and maybe there needs to be more or less, this is what a solid contract should look like. And the funny thing about it is you talk to a lawyer, and unless they're a construction attorney and actually doing litigation on the construction side, they also don't necessarily give you good advice on that. So, well, here's a base contract that they got from some template. They're not builders. They don't recognize the challenges that your unique business and your business model could potentially have. And so I'm just thinking maybe there's a way of even as a small group of people of like, hey, this is how did you guys solve this? Of like getting that wisdom from people, because you have experience right now. What did you pay for that experience, Allie? That's expensive to get.
It's an expensive contract.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and AIA will say like, oh, well, we have an AIA document, and it's like, yeah, the AIA document is like written to protect the architect. Like there's some language in there for builders, but there's not. So like if I have to do an AIA, like I have a writer that then like adds in the other terms. The other concern to your point is like I have a construction attorney, but like the concern is you don't want that contract to be thrown out in court. Like God forbid you ever end up there. Like if your contract is too robust, a judge can be like, we can't enforce this. Like, there's no way that they could ever adhere to this contract. I remember the first time my attorney told me that, I was like,
this is too much. Okay.
But I was like, okay, well, let's all just wing it then. Let's all just get started and see how it goes,
You had mentioned earlier, Allie, how like we're not your friend to the, as far as the relationship to your client. And that really kind of rings true for me, because I remember when I first started off, I was thinking, one of the kind of perspective adjustments I had to make was I was kind of like behaving like a consumer, even though I was a builder. I was thinking from the consumer's perspective on everything. Like the things I would have liked if I was a consumer would have been these things. And half the time they didn't even matter to the person that you're working for. And I think this like aspect of doing favors for people or trying to be their friend or bend over backwards for them, I started realizing nobody ever did anything for me in return. Nobody cares. Nobody cared whatsoever. You give somebody a discount, didn't care. You show up at midnight, you work around the weekend, nobody cared. It was just like, wow, why am I just absolutely demolishing myself for no reason whatsoever? And so anyway, I started realizing people respect boundaries. People respect this sort of like the relationship being what it needs to be.
Consistency is I was the same as you. Like I used to do favors, you show up. You give these people your heart and soul, and then you get completely demoralized. And more dangerously, you get angry, right? Like when they don't appreciate it. I think that was probably the best lesson I ever learned. That's like consistency is kindness. So when there's a change order, it's a change order. If there's a change, it's a change order every single time. Not because I'm looking to make more money, but because I don't want my clients living on the lottery and saying, oh, maybe if we ask for this, she's not going to charge this time. Or maybe if we
Maybe
ask
she'll
for this,
forget.
like it's like they need to know if they ask for a change, they're going to get a change order. And then they know that, and then they can make non-emotional decisions about what they want to do, right? Like, and it's so important, you know, like it's so important because favors have no value.
Yep.
Literally,
Yep.
figuratively, they don't understand it. Like, it's not a good way to run a business, you know, and it's better to just adhere to the contract and be strict about it, because people really respond to boundaries. You're absolutely right. Like they need them because they're so emotional. It's like having a lobotomy. You know, they are like, we are getting the worst version of all of our clients. Like, they might be lovely people like out in the world, but like in construction, we get the worst version of them.
Yeah.
So true. So true.
Know?
Nobody goes to a store expecting to walk out without paying for it.
Right.
That's right.
Why would it be any different for us? And we create that ourselves half the time without recognizing it. And so, yeah, great. I mean, if people walk away with anything from the show, I mean, that's such a good point. I mean, Allie, you're just so many words of wisdom. I mean, you have a process together. You've explained this so well.
Yeah. We want to have you back on. At some
yeah.
point.
Yeah. The School of Hard Knocks will do it really.
Yeah.
You know?
We can't wait to learn what you've learned in the last year when we have you back on, or 6 months.
Right.
You
Yes.
know, it's just like it's our 6 months with Allie.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it's been so fun. Thanks for joining us on the show, for spending the time. Where can people find you?
You can find me at integrobuilders.com or on Instagram at integro_builders. So I'm there.
Guys, check her out. She's awesome. So much wisdom.
I mean, you know, the funny thing is, I walked into a gas station, and I asked the lady if she could check me out, and she said I already was. And I was like, so when you said check her out, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Like, not that way, guys.
Not
like,
that way.
look at her work and learn something today. Okay, I don't know.
You can find
Just,
her on Instagram.
I mean, yeah, I just turned 40. I'm middle-aged. So if they want to check me out, I think I'm at the age where I appreciate it. You know, I'm beyond.
We're past that.
Yeah, right.
Thanks so much, Allie. Appreciate you coming
we'll
on.
Talk to you soon, Allie. Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
guys.